Hello and welcome to another episode of the Square Developer Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Moot, Head of Developer Relations here at Square. And today I'm joined by my fellow Developer Relations Engineer, Rizel, who's over working on Block open source. Hi, Rizel. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Richard. Thanks for having me. And I know it's so cool. We're like coworkers, but on different teams.
Yeah. And it's, you get to work on some of the, I'll admit, I'm a little bit jealous. You get to work on some of the cool open source stuff, but, I still get to poke around in there occasionally. But today we wanted to talk about one of our most recent releases is Goose. Mm-hmm. And I would like you to do the honors of give us the quick pitch. What is Goose?
Goose is an on-machine AI agent, and it's open source. So when I say on-machine, it's local. Unlike a lot of other AI tools that you use via the cloud, you have everything stored on your computer, private. You have control over the data, and you get to interact with different LLMs. Like you can choose whichever you want, whether it's GPT, Sonnet 3.5, whatever you prefer, you get to bring it.
Awesome. And so I'm going to hopefully give a little bit more because I want to just kind of clarify for Square developers who might be coming in. They're just building with their APIs, SDKs, trying to extend stuff for Square sellers. When we're talking about an agent, I always end up thinking the Matrix, the agents in the Matrix. And from what I understand, it's not too far off. You give it instructions and it will actually go and do things on your machine for you, write to files, edit files, run commands. It's almost like doing things that a person could do on your computer for you.
Yes, exactly. That's a really good description. It doesn't just edit code for you. It can control your system. So I had it dim the lights on my computer, open different applications. You can really just automate anything, even if you didn't know how to code.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I didn't even really think about when I first tried Goose. So one of the fun benefits of working here at Block is that I got to have fun with it before it actually went live. And one thing that I didn't really think about until I tried the desktop client, and I forgot to allow the plug. There's two different ways you can kind of interact with it. There's the CLI in the terminal, and then there's a desktop client, which I think right now works on Mac OS.
Yes.
I know there's big requests and to have it work in more than
Windows.
Just Mac, but
Yeah. Right now, we do have what I think is a working version of Windows, but the experience for the build time is not great. So we're still working through that.
Yeah. Well, having my own wrestling with working with the Windows sub Linux, I only really think of it as WSL. I've had so many headaches of trying to deal with networking and connecting and when do I need to switch to the PowerShell versus a terminal? And it's, all the reason I end up falling back to doing all of my development on my Mac.
Yeah. I haven't used the Windows computer since I was an IT support person. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what the new developments are now.
Yeah. I recently got burned by that where I didn't realize that in order to do certain virtualization stuff, you had to have a specific version of Windows, some professional version. And then that enabled virtualization to run a VM of something. I think since then they've baked in the the Windows sub Linux thing, which is basically just running Ubuntu in a virtualization for you. But yeah, that was an eye opener. But thankfully, Microsoft's working on fixing these things.
Yeah.
But we digress. So coming back to Goose, and what is it that most people have that you've sort of seen from the community as they've been starting to try it out and use Goose?
Yeah, I just see people, a lot of it is mainly developers. That's the larger side of just using it to automate a lot of the tasks that they are doing, maybe setting up, what am I trying to say? The boilerplate for their code, or just sometimes other different things. I see people wanting to build local models and just in general, or doing things with their kids. But I've also seen people doing silly experiments. This is where I find a lot of fun, where people are having Goose talk to Goose, or having a team of different, I guess, geese, a team of agents, and they're basically running a whole bunch of stuff. So they're like, they had a one Goose be the PM, and it was like instructing all the engineer agents to like perform different tasks. So it's a varied amount of things, but a lot of people are just trying to like make their lives easier and do like have Goose do the mundane task in the background while they do the creative things. I've just been doing fun, silly stuff. Like I had Goose play tic-tac-toe with me just for fun. I just wanted to see if it could do that, and that was cool. Yeah.
Have you beat it yet?
Every time. I'm disappointed. I'm like,
you think it'd be like way more advanced. I mean, like,
right.
tic-tac-toe can kind of, if I'm not mistaken, I think like based on like who goes first, it can be like a determined game as long as you play with like perfect strategy.
Yeah, I told it to play competitively. I'm still working on like the perfect prompt because I'm like, you always let me win, Goose. What's going on?
Maybe that's part of like the underlying LLMs is that they want to be helpful, and so like they think they're being helpful by letting you win, because otherwise, you wouldn't have fun.
That's true.
Well, one of the things I was very fascinated by when like first trying out the desktop client versus the CLI, because I habitually use the CLI version, but when I first opened up the desktop client, I had asked it like, what is it that you can do? And one of the things that it suggested that never even occurred to me was like using Apple scripts to run like certain automations on your system. And I immediately just went, okay, like, can you organize my downloads folder and like put everything? And it just like immediately put everything in organized folders. And like, that's something I used to like, years ago, write my own like quick little scripts to be like, oh, I need to like move all these CSVs into some place and PDFs. And it just immediately did it for me. And that was amazing because now I can like actually find where certain things are.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I think you might have been using the computer controller extension, and that might be my favorite so far. Just because of like, oh my gosh, it could actually, it's not just like writing code for me. I'm like, okay, cool. There's other stuff that can do that. Like Cursor does that as well. But like it can tap into my computer system if I give it permission and move things around. I did like a computer controller extension tutorial, and I was just making it do silly stuff. Like I mentioned, it dimmed my computer screen, it opened up Safari and found classical music to play, it did some research on AI agents for me and put it in a CSV, and then it turned back on the lights. It's like so cool. Like I can just tell it like, go do my own work for me and I'll sit back.
Yeah, that's great. And so you touched on something that I think is like kind of an interesting part about it, because and I feel like I want to come back to the part to really emphasize like Goose is an open source project, and so it allows you to attach all of those various LLMs to sort of power the experience. But what you just touched on there is like the extensions. So like the way that it can do these things, could you tell us a little bit about like what are extensions and like how are they used by either Goose or the LLM? What is the relationship there?
Yeah. So extensions are basically, I guess you can think of it as extending it to different applications or different use cases. And we're doing that through a protocol called the Model Context Protocol, which Anthropic and us have been partnering on. And basically it allows any AI agent to kind of have access to different data. So, for example, there's a Figma MCP or a Model Context Protocol, and you can connect Goose to that MCP and tell it, hey, here's some designs that I have, and Goose will be able to look at those and copy it, rather than when you're maybe working with something like ChatGPT, you have to go and give it context and be like, hey, ChatGPT, I'm working on this, here's how this goes, and it takes up a lot of time. It'll just jump right in. And like you were saying, it's open source, so anybody can make MCP. You can connect it to any MCP out there that, some of them have, to be honest, some MCPs that are out there, since it's open source, they don't all work, but the ones that do, you can connect it to Goose.
Yeah. And so that's kind of like what you were originally talking about, like the computer controller one.
Yeah.
I'm going to hopefully describe this in a way that can make this visual for those that are listening in. But like, when you're using Goose in the terminal, when you first ever install it, it'll run you through like a configuration of like, hey, like, it's basically setting up your profile and it says like, which LLM do you want to connect to? And you can kind of select from there. then it'll say like, give me your credentials. And then after that, you can get the option to, well, actually, maybe I'm jumping the gun here. I think it just like gets you through storing that. And then you can have the option of like, once Goose is configured, you can toggle on certain extensions that are included. And then there's a process to actually go like find these other ones that are published elsewhere and then add them in, right?
Yes, that's correct. We have your built-in extensions like the developer extension, computer controller, memory, and then you have the option to reach out to other extensions or even build your own custom extension and plug it in as well.
Gotcha. And so like the one I know that is the key one that's like included with Goose is the developer extension.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like what does like all like the basic developer actions that you would think of. And then computer controller, that's kind of like the one for doing more, like maybe tell me like, well, how is computer controller different than developer?
Yeah. So developer extension, it has the ability to run shell commands, shell scripts. So it'll go ahead and you say, create this file. It'll say like touch, create this file. It'll add the code for you in the places that it needs to. Whereas the computer controller, the intention of that is that it's supposed to be able to scrape the web, do different web interactions, be able to control your system. And this is all automating things, or even do automation scripts like you had mentioned before. These are all automating things for people who may not feel as comfortable coding, but they want to automate things within their system. Like that's the intention of computer controller.
Gotcha. And, you know, I'm curious as this has been out there and like, you know, like having two different versions. I don't really want to say two different versions, two different ways of like interacting with Goose with the desktop and the CLI. The desktop is really great for those that might not be more comfortable, you know, with opening up a terminal. Have you seen folks coming in who are maybe less technical, who've been trying to sort of like actually use it through this way? Like, yeah, I'm just sort of curious, like all the various types of people that have been coming in and adopting or playing around with Goose.
Yeah. Well, for a side note, even though I'm comfortable with the terminal, I like using the desktop. I just think it looks more visually appealing for me. But I have seen people in Discord. I think there was like a set of like health professionals that were part of a hackathon and they were using Goose to build whatever their submissions were. I don't know exactly what, but I thought that was interesting that they're like, they're going to build tools and submit to a hackathon, even though they're not solely software engineers. So that's one example.
Interesting. So it's been really interesting seeing all of the different ways that people have building on it. And it's been pretty exciting seeing how people have really started to just like start using it. One of the things I thought was interesting was it seemed like initially some people just didn't quite understand. And I'm sure there's just work to be done in general, not just for us, but like for people trying to use agents. That I think a lot of people assumed initially like, oh, where's the LLM? Like, why is there no like thing bundled with this? I feel like I can't do anything. And we're like, no, you have to like connect it to something else.
Yeah.
But the one that got me the most interested was trying to get it to talk to like a local LLM. And so I've tinkered with this over the past couple of weekends of like running a llama, getting a model running. But I will admit that I hit my own endpoint where I was like, okay, I have an LLM running, but it doesn't really work with the tool calling.
Yeah.
And so I think like that's something, maybe we talk a little about like, what is it? Like tool calling is kind of like that thing that how it uses the extensions. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about like what is tool calling and why is it so important?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things you said that I want to touch on. First off, agents, sure. I think for not understanding how Goose will work, I think agents are still like a fairly new concept. And everybody is like saying, oh, this is what an agent is. And like they all have their different definitions. So when I first used Goose as well, I was a little bit confused. I was like, what is this supposed to do? I think similarly when Devin came out, people were like, this is not working how I thought it would. So that just happens. But yes, open source, like using Goose with an open source LLM is like so powerful because Goose is an open source local AI agent. And then you have the local LLMs that you can leverage it with. So you can like own your data and you don't even need internet to have the LLM's running, but it is difficult. And like you said, tool calling. I'm excited about this because I just came off a live stream with an engineer from Olama. First off, the way he described tool calling was interesting. He said it's not how I thought of it, but he was saying it's kind of how the LLM learns what it should or can do. So it's kind of like, oh, I have these set of tools here. Which one should I use for what I'm going to do? So let's say like you told somebody, I want to look up or I want to go on a flight to, I don't know, Istanbul. I don't know why I picked that. When should I, like, what flights are available? How long will it take me? So then an agent will be like, oh, what tools do I have? And it might say, oh, I have a find flights tool, and I have like a map tool, and I have this. So in order to find the flight, it might use that flights tool. And in order to figure out the distance, it might use the like maps tool or something like that. So that's kind of how it would work. And it kind of, I think it refines the results that it would have rather than looking at all these different things. It's like, okay, I'm going to use this particular tool and get this particular output. When I learned a lot about open source models working with Goose or any agent, it's a lot of different like prompting tips. First off, it's best probably to ask the open source LLM, like what access or what tools do I have access to? Because open source LLMs are much smaller, so they have like a smaller context window, and they are not able to interact with an agent like the other, like the cloud ones, because they have so much more a larger context window, so they're able to take in more memory and stuff like that. So it's like, I only have this amount, so like let's get to what we need to do. Show me what tools are available. I'll grab that particular tool that's needed. And then another suggestion for when building an agent, and I think Goose will probably go in this direction to help improve the experience of working with open source LLMs, is having structured output. So the structured output would tell it kind of like what it can and can't do and how the format of it would be printed out.
Interesting.
I know I said a lot.
No, that was great. Because it had me wondering, like, with certain, when I started messing with one of the open source models, and then I was trying to use it. I think the open source model I found was from somebody within Block who actually like tried to like fine tune a version of DeepSeek to like be like, oh yeah, this one will work with tool calling. But then I think I was realizing like I still needed probably an extension for it to actually make use of it. Because, and I think that's the part where maybe I misunderstood how these things work, but like I'm sure that there's like things that Goose does that it like maybe tells the LLM almost like pretext that is sent in the context.
Yeah.
So like before you even write your prompt, it like has things that it will sort of give to be like, hey, you have tools available to you, or there's these tools. And so you might not see that in the terminal or in the desktop, but like it's actually like sort of adding these things at the beginning or maybe the end of the context to sort of say like, hey, here's some tools available to you. Make sure that, you use them. I'm oversimplifying, I'm sure, but that's kind of like how I'm guessing that might work.
That's how I seen it. So I looked at the logs because I wanted to really demo, like, I had no clue coming back from maternity leave that there was this little, not necessarily working or a little, what am I trying to say, obstacle. A little obstacle to work with open source LLMs and the agent. So I was like, oh, I'm ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and demo this live. And I realized, oh my gosh, it doesn't work perfectly. So I was looking at the logs, and it does have like a system prompt in the beginning where I didn't use DeepSeek like you did. I used Qwen 2.5, and it'll say like in the beginning, you're a helpful assistant. You have access to computer controller and developer extension, and you can do this, this, and this. I think another limitation is our hardware as well. Cause so even though it's on a local device, and like, I mean, it's supposed to work on a local device, our local devices might not have enough like RAM or memory.
Yeah.
Like I have a 64 gigabyte, but the person that came on the live stream with me, he had 128. So that worked much better. So that might have been a limitation for you as well. And even though the system prompt already told it what extensions it would have, we both had a better result when we started off the conversation saying, hey, what tools do you have access to? And it probably referred to the system prompt and then went ahead and like printed it out to us.
Yeah. And when I was tinkering with this, I actually was I took an old gaming laptop, basically
Mm.
like set it up with, I converted it from Windows to Linux, and it works reasonably well. It's still a little bit too slow for like what I would actually want to be using it. So I have like my regular gaming computer that I've actually, so when I want to mess with this, I actually just run a llama on that when it's on, and then I use it
Oh,
as like sort of a remote server, and it's like it's usable at that point. I think
yeah.
it's still not, tokens don't fly through like with the cloud LLMs. I mean, it's still kind of slowish, but it's usable, and I think like it's really fun to try out like the local LLM stuff, just because I mean, as a developer, it gives me like this mild peace of mind of like my data is not going anywhere, so like
Yeah.
it feels safer somehow.
Yeah, you're such a tinkerer. I love that.
Oh, I tinker with way too many things, like network configurations, running clusters locally on my home lab,
Wow.
all stuff that I don't think I've ever used professionally, but it just I just love learning about this stuff.
I love that. I love that.
So that kind of leads me one other thing that I'm interested in, and I want to clarify, like, not going to try to go into the realm of like pro tips about using LLMs in augmenting our development workflows. And I think we're both in a similar camp of like being in DevRel. It's really fun to just be like, I'm going to use this to like start a new project or like
Yeah.
work in a language that I'm not usually familiar with and like maybe see what I can build. I'm curious in terms of like unprofessional tips, just things that you're sort of learning intuitively as you interact with it. How has it changed for you when you first started working with LLMs with doing software development to
Mm.
like now? Have you ever noticed like, how you approach things a little bit differently?
That's a really good question. I haven't thought about it. I know when I let me think, because when I
Sure.
started using my first experience with LLMs was like GitHub Copilot, and I like
Mm-hmm.
made this whole like playbook for people to use. I was like, make sure you have detailed examples and stuff like that. But how has it changed now? Um,
I'll give you an example, like so to maybe help
yeah,
like sort of get
trigger
your
it.
creative juices flowing on it, because I know it's kind of coming out of left field, but
Yeah.
like when I first started using LLMs, I would just be like, hey, can you like build me this particular function? I think
Hmm.
my first interaction was probably similar when I first used like GitHub Copilot, and I was just like doing tab completions and be like, I thought it was really cool that I could like write a comment and like describing the function that I want, and then like I
Yeah.
would start to kind of write the function, and then it would like complete it out,
Yeah.
and then I'd maybe have to like edit like a few things. And then once, I think it was like when I first started using Goose is like the first time I really tried like one-shotting things to be like, build me like an
Mm.
entire auth service for this app. And
Mm.
then I have now kind of swung back the other way a little bit, where I tend to want to do like a little bit more pre-prompting when I want to do more of those one shots. But
Interesting.
I've found that if I scaffold out like half of it, like maybe create the initial files in a single function or something, and then I like it kind of fills in the rest, I have found it tends to work a little bit better. There's a few
Mm.
other tips that I can go into, but I don't know if that sort of helps. And like that's how I've changed a little bit in how I've been using it. Because I found that like when you try doing the one shotting, it can just be too much that it's trying to do, and I feel like also it's like too much context. Especially if you like, I think one tip that I've heard continually with Goose and with others is have like a very clear like what you considered a finished point,
Yeah.
and then move into a new context, because otherwise you can kind of go off the rails pretty fast.
Yeah. Okay. I will say this. I think my experience might be a little bit different just because when GitHub Copilot came out, I had to demo GitHub Copilot. So I was already like thinking of, okay, how do I do this one shot prompt that'll like build out this whole thing so that people can be like super impressed with me? So I think I was doing a lot of one shot prompts and I probably brought over some of that learning from there. But
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing I've been learning with building out the tutorials like for Goose is how to kind of like what you're saying, how do I not let it get the context mixed up but still
Mm-hmm.
do a one shot prompt? Because a lot of our tutorials, it's like we want to keep them short and sweet. So how do I make it do multiple things without overwhelming it or like making it just fail? Like sometimes it's like, I don't know what you want me to do, or it goes
Yeah.
over the context limit. I leverage Goose hints a lot. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of those different most AI agents and AI tools have like Goose hints, cursor rules, Klein. I think Klein has its own thing as well. I don't know if you say
Mm-hmm.
Klein or clean or whatever, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know what it is either.
Oh yeah, okay. But they all have their own little like here's context for longer repeatable prompts. That
Mm-hmm.
way I use up less of the context window and I don't have to keep repeating myself. Like, hey, make sure you set up this next JS thing. Like I'm already writing, we're going to use Next.js and TypeScript. We're going to use Tailwind or whatever it is. And then I can
Mm-hmm.
jump directly into the prompt that I want to do. And another thing I do, I don't know if this is weird. Sometimes I ask Goose, how would you improve this prompt? Like, I'll be like, I wrote this prompt and it failed. Like, I'll open a new session. I'm like, how would you
Mm-hmm.
have improved this prompt? And it might give me like a shorter one. So I kind of just, I don't know if I have like these rules in my head, but I kind of just been really, really more experimental than I was in the past, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to call out, because I think that like that's something that I had learned over time, where like even though I try to figure out a way to like codify, an approach, but I end up realizing like these are just like, I mean, it's weird. I feel like I'm going to describe this like I am the LLM, but like they're like tools, and then you figure out like, yeah, like I try this one and it's not quite doing what I want, so I'm going to go try something else, and then
Yeah.
it's just like, and I think like what you said there was like one that I've even tried and I didn't really even think about, is sometimes sometimes I'll switch LLM providers and I'd be like, I'm
Yeah.
trying to do this over here and it's not working.
Yeah.
And then like I give it, so it gives me something else as like a different context. I'm like, well, let's try and see if I feed that back over here, if that like gets me the result I'm wanting. And so, yeah, I think like that's what the biggest importance right now is, to just be continually experimenting with it, because I think like as time goes on, we're going to end up sort of learning like different, I don't know, heuristics of or
Yeah.
shortcuts of trying to like get what we want done. Because like, like sometimes I really like doing the one shots, and then other times I'm like, I maybe scaffold something out, and then I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm just going to progressively, iteratively work through this, because I don't want it to. I think like when I was trying to have it build like an auth service for an app, I was just too worried about it like in one shotting it, that I'd have like one or two tiny bugs that are hard to catch somewhere.
That's true.
And then I was just like, I really don't want to have to be going back through all of these different methods and figure out like, oh yeah, I'm actually handling the jot token incorrectly here. And I'd rather just sort of progressively work through and feel confident in it, and then be like, okay, like I'll give a concrete example of one where I was using this library. I think it's called like it's a one-time password library for Node.js. I didn't realize that it was like kind of really outdated and not maintained. And I implemented it in this app that I was working on. And I realized like it wasn't working the way that I anticipated. And then I was like, oh, there's an updated version of this library somewhere else that's like more well adopted and being maintained. And so I was writing out the conversion, but I only converted like, say, one of them, like the sign in function. And then once I had that one converted, I basically told my LLM like, hey, I'm switching from this library to this library, and I've already done this particular function. Can you go through and like update all of the other ones to use this new library? And it did it like, I would say nearly perfectly, which was pretty amazing. And, so like, I always find like there's like these little ways that you can be like, yeah, I'm going to do some of the manual work because it'll give me that confidence, but then lean on the LLM when I'm like, okay, I feel like I've done enough that it can like finish it for me.
Yeah. You know what? Now that you say more, it does make me think like, I think I use a different workflow if I'm building versus I'm doing developer advocacy work for it, like demoing or doing a tutorial. So if I am building, you're right. I probably first ask it like, what is its plan? And I do go more iteratively, and I do try to do more of it and then let Goose jump in at certain areas. But if I'm doing like a demonstration, I want it to do a one shot, which is an art in itself. It's for it to be one shot and for it to be repeatable, because like AI is non-deterministic. So it could have worked with me once and I tried to demo it and then it never works again. And people are like, this didn't work. Yep. But yeah, I think that iterative process is really helpful for me. Yeah. When I say like, hey, how are you going to go about this? And okay, I'm going to do this part. You do this. And yeah. And I always open up a new session when I feel like the conversation's been going long, because I think I know it loses context as
Yeah.
it gets too big. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally, I couldn't like agree more on that part. And in fact, I've talked with some coworkers who've had, mixed experiences with trying to use LLMs in their development work. But I think like the thing that we just touched on there is that you have to just sort of be dynamic in how you would use it, like, and understand that you might not use it the same way in every context. And that's definitely what I've also learned. Like when I've built out like a fun example app that, for developer advocacy, just to build like a proof of concept for like the rest of my team to understand, like, hey, we can build an example and say like, Next.js or Nest.js or Vue or something. And I'm just using it to be like, hey, I want you to one shot this out to like basically get this mostly working to share something. But that's not how I build it when I'm like, hey, I want to make this like published and official for people to consume, to say like, this is
Yeah.
the way that you adopt Square. I would approach that very differently when using the LLM, because I'd probably be curating like my function signatures a little bit better and like, oh, this looks really good and understandable, and then have it fill out the rest.
Yeah.
Versus just one-shotting things. Because if I was just going to have a one-shot things, I would just probably tell people coming to our platform, like, so here's Goose, here's your LLM, go ahead and one-shot your app.
That's all you need, just Goose.
There you go.
And I think you had mentioned a little earlier that like like sometimes you'll switch to a different LLM in addition to like experimenting with those prompts. Like different LLMs have different outputs, and I know on the roadmap we're planning to come out with like I guess different products come out with like benches of like, here's how well this LLM works with our tool. So we're coming out with like Goose Bench to say like, okay, maybe if you want to do this type of process or build this type of app,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe Anthropic's models might be best, or maybe OpenAI's or whatever.
That would be really helpful, because I like one other thing that I've been tinkering with when I like try using an LLM for doing like any kind of development work is I've actually like, I think there's like certain tools, I think one called like cursor.new, but it basically just like runs you through a series of like, give the project name, a description, what libraries are you using. And then it basically gives you prompts to feed in to like create certain documents.
Ooh.
But what I found interesting was like, the first one it'll do is like say it'll help create like a product requirements document, which I think we all call PRDs, but I just want to be super clear for people who might not know the lingo. And so I usually have it start out with creating the PRD, and then from there it'll create like the style, like the code style guide, and then it'll create like your Goose hints or cursor rules. And then I think finally it'll kind of create, I don't know how useful this one is, but it'll create like a README like of a progress tracker. That one I've like found like it's cool, but like I've not found it to be totally useful, because the only time it is useful is like when I finally get to like say the end of like a task where I'm like, hey, build out, like scaffold out the project. And then at the end of it, I say, go ahead and go update the progress file to like sort of clarify like what has been built, what should be built next, and like where are we at. Then I kind of use that as like the start of the next session of like, hey, check the progress thing to see like where we are and what we need to build next, and then work from there.
That's so smart. I like that.
It's like really been useful for me. But at the same time, I would say like by this fourth or fifth session, I don't know why, it starts like kind of getting a little like I run into too many errors. And I don't know if it's actually like specific to the number of sessions, or the particular feature that I'm building is maybe too complex and I need to spend more time breaking it into smaller pieces.
Interesting. I want to try that on my own. I didn't think about like saving it. I think the memory extension would do that as well for you, maybe?
Yeah. To be clear, I think in this instance, I was using like something like Cursor.
But
okay. I think I was wanting to try this with Goose, because I do have the memory extension enabled, but I just haven't actually gotten to like, this is like sort of what I've been doing on my own at home. But I definitely want to try this more with Goose, especially because Goose has Goose hints, and I can very easily convert my other rules to work for Goose.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been very useful for like larger, more complex things that I've been building. But I still feel like it has its like limitations.
Yeah. I think I like the challenge of figuring out like what's stopping you and how do I get around this? And you're right, you did say you were using Cursor or some type of tool, and I heard Goose in my head.
Yeah. But I found it like really helpful. Just, trying to just experiment with all the various different tools. There's a lot that I think all of us don't know. There's a lot of stuff to just keep figuring out. Like, I just think that it's weird to like say to someone like, hey, I could tell you the different ways that you could use this, but I think right now, most people should actually just figure out how it can work for them. Because like, I think if you go online, you can find like people on all ends of the spectrum. There's some people, they work on stuff that's like so bespoke, complex that they go, oh, LLMs are just not useful for me. They just too bug ridden, or the performance like of the functions it creates isn't useful. I think those people are like one end of the spectrum, whereas, other of us are like, oh my gosh, like I spend most of my day doing architecture stuff, like API architecture stuff. And so having an LLM to like do the actual implementation of a design is like huge unlock, because I might come up with a great API design, but then I'm like, oh, this is going to take me so long to code up. And like an LLM feels like a huge unlock.
Yeah. And I really resonate with your point of like, figure out what works for you. You really just got to tinker with it and be like, I want to get this done, and figure out how it'll apply to you. Because like you said, I could tell people one way, but I might not work in the same way as they do, or I'm not working as complex stuff as them. So yeah.
I mean, and not to like anthropomorphize it too much, but I feel like it's probably not too dissimilar if like somebody just said like, hey, like out of nowhere, they said, hey, we gave you an assistant.
Yeah.
You'd be like, I don't even know what I'm like. You'd at first be like, what do I use the assistant for? Like, can you organize my files? Can you like it takes you a while to even like sort of figure out like, okay, like what can you do? What are you good at? Like, you don't know until you actually like have that. And so I think, we all have to just kind of like start interacting with it, and then we'll figure out where we actually want help. You might find out like there's certain areas where like we don't want it to help us in these things, but we do want it to help us in those other things.
Yeah. Get to know the LLM.
Exactly. Yeah. Even the people who think, oh, I don't really like it for coding. You're like, yeah, but you might find out like you hate writing super long, complicated emails, or reading super long, complicated emails. You'd be like, hey, can you go ahead and like give me the TLDR of this, or like write in an email for it? It can be that simple.
Sometimes I use LLMs to make sure my emails sound polite. Cause like, I'm like, sometimes my emails don't come out polite, even though I'm like not even throwing any shade. So like, if it sounds like I'm throwing shade, take it out.
That's great. I think more people should be using that. Maybe I'm biased because being in the DevRel space, you get to interact with all kinds of folks.
Yes, that's true.
They all have very different communication styles. Not to name names, we did have one person who, in the Square community, who I actually was very thankful for them, but they spent so much time just finding every single bug in our APIs. And it drove some people a little bit crazy because like, oh my gosh, he found another one. But then I'm just sitting here just like, yeah,
thank you.
This is free QA. This is amazing. Like, I'm going to keep encouraging this person to keep saying this stuff. I don't find it annoying in the least.
I could get it on. I could understand it on both sides. Like as an engineer, you're like, no more work. But as like a developer advocate, you're like, yay, my product's getting improved.
Yeah. And it's validating because they love the product so much. They want it to be better. So of course, let's go do that.
That's true. I love that.
Yeah. Well, I think we're coming up on our time here. Rizel, thank you so much for coming here and telling us a little bit about Goose. I think here's probably a good point for us to sort of plug. Where can people go to learn more about Goose, Blocks open source, or if they want to just sort of follow you to learn more about any of this stuff?
Yeah, I would, if I were like an engineer or somebody interested in open source itself, I would go to github.com/block/goose. And if you wanted to go on the website or install it, I would go to block.github.io/goose. And to find me on the internet, on any social media platform, I'm Black Girl Bites.
Perfect. And I will also just do the extra plug of check out the Block Open Source YouTube.
Oh yeah.
And if you want, you can also check out the Square Developer YouTube if you're interested in things on Square Developer. And if you're working on a project or you want to learn more about what you can build or what is available on Square, go to developer.squareup.com, or you can follow us at SquareDev on X. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.